35 years, I was going to the doctor saying there's something wrong. I need help. And they were looking for disease and they were looking for tumors and they were looking for anything, but they never looked at the root cause.
Just do this one meditation. A lot of times we take it for granted that is it.
And I'm thinking, how did this happen to me? You're going in the wrong direction.
It's the things that you don't expect. It's the things that, in fact, we are taught to do into a realm where we can unlearn the crap.
You did that when I met you.
See, this is magic. I love this. Welcome to Mindfully Sovereign, the podcast that invites you to reclaim your feminine self-authority and unleash the abundance within. My name is Sapha. I am your host, and I'm here to help guide you past your limiting beliefs and into the heart of your unwavering and undeniable power. This podcast is all about reclaiming your feminine self-authority, learning the art of self-seduction, and awakening your inner goddess so that you can become an aligned match to your most abundant life yet. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and get ready to become mindfully sovereign. Hey, well, welcome everyone. I am so excited to have a very special guest with us today. We've got Kathy Baldwin. And Kathy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this particular point in your life? Because I know that you do amazing work around getting unstuck. So if you want to share a little bit, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I have been looking forward to this conversation. You are amazing. So that being said, my name is Kathy Baldwin. I am the author of Unlearn the Crap about personal success and empowerment. And I created a TV show by the same name, Unlearn the Crap. And it was my journey of not knowing that what I was living was in fact disempowering, meant to take me down, and it did. It created mental, physical, emotional unwellness, and I had a complete breakdown. So I'm now on a mission to tell people that the things that we were brought up with, the good girl, the put others before ourselves, all of that is all purposeful disempowerment.
Yes. Okay. So I'm just snapping because I don't want to scare the people listening to the podcast with me clapping and screaming. But yes, goddess, yes to everything that you just said. And I think that there's something so beautiful and so powerful about having a conversation that is open and honest about the things that really disempower us as human beings, and where we can start collecting ourselves and finding that place of mindful sovereignty, right? This is like my jam. This is why I do what I do. But I would love to hear a little bit more about your story. You said, and I love this because of the way that you phrased it, it just was very, very beautifully put. But you said that there was a time when you just realized all the things that were I'm butchering it, but the things that you were experiencing were in fact disempowering you. As someone who was in a toxic relationship for 12 years myself, and who, despite like years of like work and therapy and introspection and everything, took a minute, and by a minute I mean years, right? A full decade at least, to sink my teeth deeply into the true essence of self-empowerment. I can completely relate to that. I can completely understand how it's just so incognito. It's the things that you don't expect. It's the things that in fact we are taught to do and to follow that get in that very sticky space of not just disempowerment, but disproving of the self, almost like this is not who you truly are, because what you really need to be is this mold. And so I love that. So if you could tell us more about that, I would be so happy.
Absolutely. I've been a learner and a studier for over 40 years. I mean, I started watching Tony Robbins infomercials when he was doing them in the middle of the night, and reading, going to all sorts of retreats and seminars. I mean, I learned everything from neurology to biology to psychology, everything in between, because I'm just one of those curious people. And so I used all that information to help people develop themselves. I gave it all away. I thought that the fact that I was learning it meant that I was taking it in and actually up making it change who I was. And I wasn't. I was only learning it. I was an advocate for suicide prevention. I worked with the mental health associations. I was very well educated, very, very well educated. So when I had my complete breakdown and I was in the depths of depression and um, suicidal, um, and I'm thinking, how did this happen to me? I thought I learned enough that I was safe and I was protected. But
Yeah.
I didn't implement it, and I didn't understand how much those early programs were overriding my intellectual learning.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that so much. This is the realm of embodiment. This is where we start to see the difference. I was having a conversation with one of my clients actually yesterday, which was really interesting because I hold so much compassion for the lived experience because I've lived it and I still do on a daily basis. And one of the things that she had said was, how do we bridge the gap between the knowing, like, on here, right? Because I had mentioned something and she's like, I know that I know the thing and I know it up here, but how do we bridge the gap between that and having it be a lived experience? And I laughed a little bit and I was like, that's where the realm of embodiment comes from. And that's for me, the starting point is getting to know the self in a way that isn't judgmental, in a way that it's very curious, and in a way that holds space for almost watching, having like an outside body experience in a very real day to day, moment to moment time. Like, in other words, you're always going to have a choice. You can choose in this moment to act and be about a certain way, which oftentimes for us is our patterns. Like you said, everything is kind of in the background when it comes to our subconscious, because I'm very much like you and I've studied psychology for like so long, and all of these, like neurology and all of these things, and so I get you. But in the realm of that subconscious, that's what's running you 99.9% of the time. So are you in connection to that in such a way that, when I used to teach yoga, I always said this, it's a monkey mind situation. You have this part of the self that is running sort of the business behind the scenes and making all of this mess and throwing, like, just doing things that is maybe are making your life a little more challenging and are not as enriching for your life. And you don't even know that they exist. But the second you start paying attention to them, they like jump to attention. That's the monkey mind idea. It's like the mind is kind of doing all of these things. But the second you start noticing, it's like, and so the first step is that awareness, and then going into the embodied action, the embodied living. That's what it is. Living about the thing that you are moving through is a very different. It's a whole different process. And what it asks us to do is to go beyond just the knowledge and to create space for this to become a lived, palpable, almost something that we can taste reality. And that makes all the difference in the world. And I hear you when you say, one, I that you were in this world, right? A lot of times we think, or we take for granted, that if we just read one thing in a self-help care book, right? If we just take one course with Tony Robbins or whoever, if we just do this one meditation, a lot of times we take it for granted that that is it. Like, once we do it, everything is going to be solved. And it's like that push button that is going to fix everything. And it really isn't. There's so much more that goes beyond that process and that helps get us into a realm where we can unlearn the crap. So, if you can speak a little bit more about that, and then also give us some insight into your amazing book.
Absolutely. For me, I'm too intellectual. And so even my spiritual life, I couldn't connect to it because I was always in my brain. And I thought that that was a positive thing because I am intellectual, I'm smart, I'm a lot of really good things, but it kept me disconnected from the energetic, from the physical part of my life. And so what I learned and unlearned was that when we connect all of them, when we understand that we are energy and we are physical bodies and all of that is communication, We are being spoken to in an energetic level. We know this when we go to the doctor and we get hooked up to EEGs to measure our heart electrocardiogram. That energy is going out. We know it in medicine, but we don't know we can do it for ourselves. We don't know our central nervous system. We don't know how to turn it on and off. We don't know how our beliefs and our habits are wired in our brain. We can upgrade our software in our computer and go from a DOS operating system to now on, incredible smartphones, but yet we expect our bodies and our lives to be running on outdated software that are not connecting to who we are today. We don't even know it's happening. And so when I say doctors gave me pills and platitudes, my body was screaming at me. I was developing so much disease between fatigue, exhaustion, fibromyalgia, adrenal fatigue, weight gain. My body was in constant pain. I had to have both of my knees replaced. My body was literally taking a 2x4 to me, trying to get my attention. And I had these beliefs saying, put on your big girl panties, soldier on, you can sleep when you're dead. If it's to be, it's up to me. All of these things that we were taught. And so even though I was under pure exhaustion, and I mean literally, my mind overrode my body and pushed me to my breaking point. That's how strong your mind can control things. So if your mind is that strong that it can push past everything, why not use it as your superpower? Why not take that information and know how all of the systems operate, which is the basis of my book, because I had to self-heal. Because I was a business corporate person, I believed in corrective action, root cause analysis, all of these things. And I had to apply it to myself to heal myself because the doctors were just drugging me. And when I went to a psychiatrist and he put me in the worst place, in absolute rock bottom in the hospital. And when I told him, he told me his role was only in medicating me, not healing me.
Whoa.
Yeah, that is the medical system that we have. It is about what pill can we give what problem. And when I said to him, all these pills you're putting me on, they're making my hair fall out. He says, well, there's a pill for that. I thought, I don't want to live as a chemical experiment. I want to get in touch with who I am and what my body is saying and what my heart and my soul are saying and what my purpose is. Just like building a business, I knew how to build a business by creating a mission statement and a vision and your boundaries and your rules of engagement and all those things. I didn't know I could create myself until all the pieces were so broken that that person in that life was never, ever going to be put back together. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me because I am so strong and I am so stubborn that I was not going to figure this out until I was shattered in a million pieces. And so my mission and my goal is to teach people you don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to lose everything. If you see and take corrective action early, you can choose empowerment. And that is something that I don't believe our society wants us to know because it changes us from being controllable and manipulatable as consumers and workers. And it puts us in the driver's seat where we have the ability to make a huge difference in this world.
And it's a pathway opener to the heart of the divine feminine too, which like right now, the way that our global conscious is terrifying, right? Like this is the thing that we have for so long. These systems that we've put in place have been trying to avoid going back to that matriarchal structure, avoid going back to a place where we connect to Mother Earth, avoid going back to the place where we are empowered because we are beings that are power, not because there's some sort of external force that we are lesser than. Like there are so many little details that go into contemplation of that. And I always say it's be very mindful of the things in your life. And this could be said of a relationship to self as well, in terms of for those of us who are very gung ho and who I always say I like burning the candle at both ends, but I've started to learn not to do that anymore. Right. So, even in terms of that for us in developing a relationship to self and understanding that it comes down to holding deep intimacy and deep space for really understanding who we are at a level that doesn't get filled with shame and or guilt, because guilt and shame are, for me in my opinion, two of the most potent tools utilized to enslave and ensnare and belittle people. And when it comes to this environment, even when it comes to our health, and I find this so disheartening, but also I find myself feeling hopeful that there's a small turn of the leaf, even if it's just by, increments, little by little. But even when it comes to our health, it's just been this whole thing where everything is driven by shame and guilt. If you go into a doctor's office, you're either guilted or shamed for being overweight, for being a woman who menstruates, for being someone who is too hyper nervous or too hyperactive, or for being someone who is very intense, and the platitudes are never ending, never ending. It's like, well, you just have to stress less. Uh, Excuse me. Like, what?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what was happening, because for 35 years I was going to the doctor saying there's something wrong, I need help. And they were looking for disease, and they were looking for tumors, and they were looking for anything, but they never looked at the root cause. And when my knees started to break and I developed osteoarthritis, I will never forget the shaming that I got from the doctor at how bad my body had eroded. And he shamed me about saying, look, fat, 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 fat. But we now know that fat stores inflammation. Fat or inflammation is what protects us from those stress cortisol hormones that are not released. And when we understand that it's not stress less, it's understand how to healthily release that and let it move through your body, let it do what it's supposed to do. Understand the cycles and the rhythms of what is natural, what is empowering, because we have to have good stress, but we have to release it naturally. So here I am now trying to clean up 40 years of built-in trauma and stress. And you know, if someone could have stopped me ahead of time, I had a conversation with somebody because I was being interviewed for this upcoming show, and they were saying how they were pushed to teach resilience. And my thought was, what if you had been taught how to connect to your inner self, your inner purpose, so that you had a natural energetic pull to who you were. And that when you needed energy and when you needed courage and when you needed these things to push beyond those comfort zones and the way our brains are written, if we knew that we had this tool of our central nervous system, if we knew we had the tool of how the universe works, about the law of compensation and the law of relativity and creating our individual perspectives and how to rewire our own brains. What if we had a whole toolbox on how to live authentically and on purpose?
Mhm.
We wouldn't need to be pushed externally. It would be an inner natural. A tree does not need to fight to grow. It
Mhm.
just uses its resources and it thrives.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I'm glad you brought up the law of compensation because I want us to circle back to that. Because I'm sure a lot of people aren't familiar with it. Like we hear the law of attraction a lot, but this is one of those things that I know it's your expertise. So we'll circle back to that. One of the things that I love that you're touching on though is there's a distinction between the kind of resistance and the kind of space that allows a person to lean in order to grow, much like a seedling breaking through the husk in order to move through the soil and then finally come out and become a tree. There's a difference between that and a forceful intention, and it makes a world of difference because that forceful intent, more often than not, is going to break the thing down and make it crumble. I love to speak in story mode. So I always reference back in my mind's eye. I think about the story of King Arthur and the sword on the stone. So, because imagine the level of ridiculousness, right? Imagine you've got these like big, bulky dudes, like thicker than Schwarzenegger back in his day, or like thicker than The Rock, or whatever. These dudes are like going up to this sword and trying to pull it out of this stone and like heaving and probably like popping veins and like just hurting themselves. I imagine there were people herniated at this point, not being able to get the prize because they were so forceful. And in comes this kid out of nowhere without any sort of lineage that people knew at that time to understand, right? Within the realm of how many stories has been told about this. But in comes this scrawny little nobody, followed by this weird dude with a long beard. And he just walks up and pulls it out. Like no effort, no nothing, just comes out. And it's the thing about that in our lives is that we get to live lives with that level of easeful power on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't have to be the grind your teeth down, bury yourself, move yourself to the point where you are no longer even a human being existence. It gets to be the kind of existence where, hey, there is this little earthquake, or there is this little pushback on your realm, and you get to choose who you are going to be when that happens and at what level you are going to show up, and you still get to do it easily without having to be forceful about it and without having to deplete your power. And that's where empowerment comes through. But I love that visual just in terms of, listen, yeah, sometimes you have to lean in, but leaning in doesn't mean giving so much of yourself that you are left completely bereft of energy, of life source, of mind power, of physical health. You don't have to go to that extreme. Leaning in sometimes means, hey, this job is killing me. It's time to walk away. Leaning in sometimes means, and I'll use myself for the example, this relationship is no longer working. It's time to walk away. Leaning in sometimes means being easeful. If you're someone who works out, sometimes that means you take a day off. Dude, like stop working out 7 days a week and doing high intensity interval trainings. Like take time to get to know the cycles, the flow, everything. So I love that you said that. But let's have a conversation about the law. Come on.
Okay, well, you talked about the law of attraction, and that's what everyone has all of this attention on. That law of attraction is a result. It's not the cause. So when we look at the law of rhythm, knowing that there is a time, a cycle for everything. So you say lean in. Well, sometimes you need to lean back. Sometimes you need to rest. Sometimes you need to move. And you need to know what the cycle of your emotions are, what your body is, what your intentions are, what you're building. Everything has its own cycle. But it's also knowing that you will be equally compensated for your efforts and contribution, regardless of what it is. So you got to be really mindful about what you are putting out because it is going to come back. You talk about stories, you know that thing where they've got the five balls hanging down and you pull one on one end and it
Hmm.
hits and it so that is the law of compensation. And I truly believe that if you're pulling the center one, you don't have a lot of movement, you don't have a lot of swing. And I believe that we are in such a big paradigm shift where it has swung so far to the unhealthy that unfortunately it will be equally compensated and we will go to the extreme unhealthy on the other end, but eventually we will cycle back in. But if we can minimize that, if we can minimize that by knowing how it works, by stepping in and putting intentional energy, I have this, I have this utopia belief and mission that if every single person was living in true personal alignment, there would be no hate, there would be no prejudice, there would be no war, because there'd be nothing to control. There's no more fear, there's no more anything, because we are all just living. The trees are not out to kill the other trees because a spruce is growing where a pine is. The most beautiful forests are the ones that have the depth of size and color and different seasons and strengths, and they share their resources and they become bigger and more powerful together.
Mhm.
We have been disconnected, saying we all need to be one kind, one thing. That is what takes us out of our power. So imagine if, this is my fantasy, imagine if I had been born into a world where my parents understood the way DNA works and the way the brain is wired and the way the physical body projects. And when I start having emotions I don't know how to control, they can help teach me what those emotions are and how those vibrations work. And then how to purposefully choose when I want to bring myself back into alignment. First, allow those feelings, allow them to process and come out, but then to make a conscious choice and to know who I am and know what my purpose is. And instead of trying to be perfect for everything and everyone, the way we were taught in schools and jobs, that we had to do it all. I mean, I I am not an accountant. I'm not a numbers person. I had to take accounting 101 3 times in order
Mhm.
to get my business certifications and diploma or degree, whatever you want to call it. Um,
Mhm.
but I never used any of that information. And I was trying to be forced into learning and doing something that had nothing to do with my personal genius.
Mhm.
It's those little micro traumas that just eat away at our soul.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant.
No, not at all, and I'm also a believer we shouldn't apologize unless it's, like, actually hurting someone, because it's, like, this thing that speaking of unlearning the crap, right, it's one of those, like, feminine, like, wounds that are very touchable, like, apologize for everything. But no, I love it because oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's also cultural. I'm Canadian.
Yeah, well, no, I get that. I'm technically so I was born and raised in Mexico City, and we do have this at least when I was growing up there, we the culture was very gentle and kind and sweet. And everything had to be like so delicate and nice, and a lot of that did have to do with like, oh, I'm sorry, and everything is like little and dainty and but so I get it. There are so many levels to this, but I love that dream. I love that vision. I think it bespeaks of so many beautiful qualities, not just of the divine feminine, but of the divine masculine. I think that it bespeaks the beauty of existence in a reality that fully embraces the existence of things as they are, where this is like an enveloping, where we can envelop our thoughts, our beingness, the way in which we move, the conversations we have, the way that we express who we are in this physical body and with everything that we have in a way that gets received lovingly and that gets received with you are worthy no matter what, rather than the you need to present evidence that you get to be worthy and that you get to be welcomed into the tribe. It also is very much speaking this language of moving outside of the thought and of the perspective that we have to be individualistic in the way that who was it, and I always forget this, but whoever said that man was an island unto himself or whatever, it's like that whole idea, that plus the idea of the lone wolf as being the most powerful, or what, I just think it's so crappy and it's so dumb and it makes no sense, and it just continues to perpetuate the cycles, because kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, these are things that when you really think about it can shame or guilt you into remaining in a system that is going to be, yeah, but you can't ever strive for more because you're not fulfilling these roles. You can never be too much, because if you're too much, then you're no longer this like special, unique being that gets to be the alpha. Or if you're too far removed from the idea of this alphaness, which is total bullshit, then you don't get a say or you don't get a seat at the table. There's so much that we can take this in so many different directions, and there's so much nuance to this conversation. But I love what you're saying about that dream. And yeah, I say this all the time. I agree with you in terms of the pendulum swinging. I believe we are in a process of healing. And as with our bodies, when we are healing things, things sometimes need to be uprooted, things need to be shuffled off, they need to be pulled away, they need to bleed, these things are what happens when we are healing. And then in the process of that, this new life comes through, and that pendulum will swing and we'll find that middle point. And I believe we're in this beautiful shift right now where a lot of us are asking these questions and trying to find our way. Of course, there's always going to be extremes. Like you said, it kind of goes so far off one point or the other. And yet we can always come back to center. And importantly, I believe that that is where that differentiation between logically knowing something and embodying something in our lives comes in as well, in terms of digesting and ingesting, I should say, ingesting all of this knowledge, ingesting all of the information does not a master make, right? This is one of those things that I learned really deeply when I was learning, and still as I continue to practice and teach yoga still after freaking like 17, 14 years, however long it's been a long time. So, which is this, is that it does not mean the mastery. The mastery is in the act of showing up with it in its fullness. It's the mastery is in moving. That mastery is in following this space and allowing it to then open the doorway for other things and asking questions and not being rigid. Oops, I just hit the microphone. Sorry. Just not being rigid, so that that rigidity doesn't break us and leave us in a state of stagnation so deep that then nothing can be birthed from it. So I do love everything that you're saying. And so it, in that realm, that is also, I think, the transition that we can make for ourselves, where we can look at, instead of taking a book and saying, I read this book cover to cover, therefore I know everything that there is to know in this entire world about this subject matter. What if we take the book and say, I welcome this and I'm open to see what it shows me as I live it, like as I bring it into a real experience in my world. And I'm welcome to have corrections come up about it. I'm welcome to have questions that are contrary to it about it. I'm open to welcome teachers that might know something different or a different perspective. I'm welcome to mull it over. I'm ready to like flip it upside down and look at it inside sideways, and maybe at some point determine this is no longer okay for me. Like, it is that space. And it, when it comes to these laws, right? The law of attraction, I think the reason why we're so like fixated on it is because we believe this is the only way. This is the only way to live a life that feels expansive and amazing and supple and delicious, and to get, quote unquote, get what I want, is for me to follow this law step by step, day by day. And this is where we start falling into that space where everybody's like love and light always and like high vibes only. And I'm just so not the person for that. I'm very dark feminine, you know this. But so it's like one of those things where I think that that's where we fall into that space. And so let's talk about that a little further. And the differentiation, again, we're talking about two very different laws and two very different aspects that when we take them together can in fact help take that sort of knowledge base into a world of embodied action.
Absolutely. And this is where my intellectual being had to go through my own transition. The law of polarity states that everything must have an opposite. The law of gender has to have a female and a masculine. When you think about creation, it is, and IOM, the ending of words like creation, intention, imagination, that means it has been sparked. It has been charged. It now has a charge, and it requires the polarity of the genders. It requires the polarity in order to get a charge. So if we're only looking for the light, then we're not seeing the full light because there's no contrast. It's only brightest when there's a contrast of the absolute darkness. Otherwise, we're living in a world of beige where nothing has any power, any ability to create. It does need to be messy. It does need to be sparked with energy and power, and that power is also in receiving as well as creating. It is back and forth. And when you understand all of the laws of the universe, not just try to cherry pick, but understand that it is a cohesive whole because we are interconnected, interrelated systems that is living in an interconnected, interrelated world. We are physical, we are energy, we are all of it. And we are creators, so we can never be done. So if you're trying to be rigid and say this is the only way, you're not understanding that once you got to that one part of evolution, there's another and another, because we're constantly creating, we're constantly evolving. They're proving that with neuroscience and our DNA. Our DNA does not stop. It constantly creates new proteins, which then create new DNA. We are 100% brand new physical beings every 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
All of our wiring, our beliefs, everything is evolving. And when we try to stay stuck into what we think is a place of doneness, well, then we are not fulfilling our destiny. We're not understanding that there's a pull for more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that doneness doesn't just end there either. This is maybe we're getting really deep, but this is one of those things that blows my mind, where it's a constant expansion. It's this, I always say, it's very difficult, especially for those of us who've undergone trauma and who are in the way of learning to heal ourselves. It's also very difficult for those of us who do understand and read and seek and search and sink our teeth into so many different spaces to feel, hey, I've done the things, I've meditated, I've read all the books, I've listened, I've done, and I'm still not there. And where that there is a complete illusion to begin
It's
with.
a judgment.
It's a judgment. Yeah. It's like, where is that? What is this goal that we have in mind that we think that when we get there, what's going to happen? Are we going to be like perfect beings? I'm like, I think if we got to a point where we got quote unquote there enough, we would evolve. Maybe we would become light. We would become energy. Who knows, right? I don't have the answer, but my point is even that there doesn't just stop at that goal in our minds. It's kind of like when you in business, for those of us and for those listeners who are very entrepreneurial, right? In your business, you're not just going to go, I want to make $100,000 and then stop. You can say that. But you know damn well that by the time you get there, you're like, okay, what's next? What's my next goal? What's my next expansion? It always goes in your relationships. When we have intrapersonal relationships, right? We're falling in love with someone. And does it end at just the first date, second date, third month, 1 year marriage? No, it like keeps evolving. And I fully believe that this is also one of the reasons why so many of us do get stuck, is because we start thinking rigidly that, hey, this was the end goal and this is as far as it's going to go. And then we get in this place where everything becomes stagnant and stale, and we stop giving space for us to grow, for the other person to grow, for the world to grow, for our environment to grow, for the ebbs, for the flows, for the cycles, instead of allowing and observing and then choosing. Because I think that's a big part of it too. Then we get to choose. Then I get to choose right? If we're looking at polarities, I get to choose as a being who feels very deeply centered in the feminine energetic field that I would welcome a masculine energetic field in this way, from this sense. Like, it's my choice. It's a choice that I am looking. And I know that that is going to create sparks. It's going to create magic. It's going to create something. I know that if I'm someone who resonates with the understanding of the dark, I also love the light just as much. I know that I seek it just as much. I know that both are valuable, both are equal, both are important, and that the growth of all of them are just as important. Yeah.
I love, love, love what you just said. And it just sparked something that I wanted to share. I told you I'm a lover of just about everything. So I've studied quantum physics. I've studied it to the point where I understand the concepts. I'm not a quantum physicist. I don't want to know how to work with it, but I understand. I also study astrology and astronomy, and they are the exact same thing on different scales. And so our universe is still expanding. Our universe has more galaxies and universes in it than we can even fathom, and we still don't know what that is, but it's still expanding out. And with quantum physics, everything goes down to its smallest. Do you know, I read this amazing article in one of the astronomy science books, and it was that they have figured out that in space where they have the black holes, that black hole is actually more powerful. And when I equate that to what I've also learned in quantum physics, the thing is, it's either something is either a particle or it's energy, but it only happens with intention and putting consciousness on it. Before intention and consciousness, it's potential. It is pure potential. And that's what every moment and every cell and everything we live in is pure potential. And we can make choices in any direction. And when we try to control the uncontrollable, all we're doing is making ourselves crazy. And we're part of that crap that is designed to keep us disempowered. There is a reason that 98% of the wealth is with 2% of the world's population. There is a reason there are people starving. There is a reason why there's so much inequality. And it is because of that crap. And it's funny because I was once talked to by somebody in marketing, and they said, "Do you think you should use language like crap?" And I thought, I don't want to sugarcoat anything and use words that are going to be acceptable. This is crap. And we're going to put it on the table and understand that, yes, you got a lot of crap to unwind, but not all of it is yours because it's generational.
Mm-hmm.
It's generational. It's been going on for thousands of years. You're
Mm-hmm.
never going to undo it all. You just have to keep taking a right step and recognizing when you've taken a wrong step. Your body, your mind, your energy, your emotions, your central nerve, everything is there as your GPS to say, you're going in the wrong direction. At the next available safe place, turn around and make a U-turn. It's information to make a choice. Our power is only in our choice and our decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could not agree more. I mean, that's where we crown ourselves. At the end of the day, we are the ones at the helm. We are the ones. There is a lot of stuff that can inform, and yet we are still the ones. Things don't get to be perfect. They don't get to be pain free. They don't get to be creamsicles and unicorns, and it doesn't have to be that way. And at the end of the day, we are about the choosing of the expression of the self. Like, who am I going to be today? How am I going to show up for myself in this regard? Who am I choosing to be? What is my capacity to intake this? What is my decision to step up to the plate, crown myself, and move from there? And I'm laughing at what you said about the marketing thing. I have this is we could have like 5 more hours of this conversation. I know we're
I
running out of time. But
knew that when I met you.
see, this is magic. I love this. I was so happy that we met. But yeah, this is it's one of those things. And I will just make a quick note because I do have another guest that will come in and talk about this a little bit more with me. But I will say this. For anyone who's got a very whatever your expression of your soul is, just let it be. Whatever your expression of who you are is, let it be. Be courageous enough to be the too much woman. Be brave enough to show up exactly as you are in this moment without thinking that you have to change a single iota, and just let yourself exist in this world, because there's always going to be someone who's going to be behind the scenes. You can't use the word crap. You can't say that you are a feminine embodiment coach. No one is going to understand that. You have to focus on this one thing. You have to niche down. You have to water down your message. People are stupid. I can't tell you how many times, by the way, if you did not know this, this is what marketing experts say. People are stupid. You have to dumb your message down. And the fact that that is still a conversation that is being had, number one, fuck that. And it goes back to the same thing of who the hell are we trying to put under our thumb and why? And it goes into this space of just be, show up. Maybe things don't go the way that you want them to, but you get to exist. You get to have an expression of who you are in this world. So I just love that. And again, I know that we're running out of time. So I would love for you to give us just some breath, right, around this idea of unlearning the crap from a place as someone who, like myself, understands very logically and is very smart, right? From a place of not just by reading and thinking that you know it all. Do you get to do this?
Absolutely. I want to equate giving birth, because we are women talking right now. And we know that in order to become a mother and be impregnated and create, we need to receive. And
Mhm.
when we receive, there is a time and a rhythm to when that receiving will create. And there is a gestation period as to when it will create a baby. And it will be painful, and your body will hurt, and you will change, and you will evolve, and you are not ever going to be the same person at the end of it. We accept that as part of becoming a parent, of becoming a mother, but yet we want different, or no, I don't think we want, I think we've been taught to live numb, to live small, and not accept that there are all of these elements to creation in our world. Yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, it's going to feel amazing. Yes, it's going to change you. That thing where people say you've changed. Well, thank God. Like, did I still want to be who I was when I was in kindergarten? That was a stage of my life, and I did the best that I could at that stage. But as we grow and as we evolve and as we go in through these different stages, we have different experiences to receive, and we have different gifts to give.
Mm. Yeah, that perfect. I love it. And I love it so much. So before I let you go, I would love for you to share, in your opinion, in your world, what does being mindfully sovereign get to be about?
Authenticity. And I know it's an overused word right now, but the Beatles song, Let It Be, just
Mm.
be yourself. Because the thing happens in our body called homeostasis when everything is in alignment and it is in movement, because we can't stay stagnant, we can't stay stuck. So we're constantly moving in and out and in and out. And when we live like that, that is pure power. And anything is possible.
Yep. I love it. Well, Kathy, I am so happy that you were able to join me today. This was great.
My
And it's always so good to see
tail
you.
is wagging.
Yes, this is a great happy dance. So thank you so, so much. I so appreciate you. And also, before I let you go, I'm so bad. I get so excited about these things. I sometimes forget. But where can the listeners find you? Where can they get your book? Where can they connect with you?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable and explain that I have just gone through a rebranding because as I transition from the corporate world to being self employed and bringing my mission and everything to the world, I was listening to all those marketing people. I was listening to all those coaches, and I spent a ton of money that didn't need to be. And I was
Mhm.
creating this brand and that brand. I have rebranded everything under my name. KathyBaldwin.me. And it's Kathy with a K. So everything I do is now under the umbrella of who I am. My coaching, my speaking, my podcast, my TV show, my book, everything is different aspects of me. And I'm not following the rules. So I'm easy to find if you can spell Kathy with a K, Baldwin.me, and I am there. I'm not one of those people who is hands off or kept at arm's length. I want to be there. I really, really want to help every single person find their unique gifts. I don't want to be someone's crutch. I don't want to be their pills and platitudes. I want to help them see how beautiful and empowered and special that they are. And so I am accessible.
Love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Of course, the notes will be in the link where the podcast is. But thank you again so much for everything.
Thank you so much for this. This has been the highlight of my week having this conversation.